In this video, we will be assembling our new SingleCell MK2 enclosure for the Prusa MK3 series of 3D printers. We will be following the exact same procedure that is outlined in the owner's manual, so we invite you to have it open while watching the video. The manual and STL files can be found on our prusaprinters.org page, and the hardware kit can be purchased from our website. Let's get to it. Alright, in step 1, we're going to install 2 of the C1 corner connectors into the frame marked F1. Now, Luke actually did not install this first one correctly. You want to push it in all the way by hand as far as you can go and then tap it in. But this is his first time assembling an enclosure, so we won't give him a hard time. You'll notice in this corner connector, again, this stuff is highlighted in the owner's manual, so hopefully you have that up, that one of the inner corners of the corner connectors does not have a flange in it. Those two are on the same side of that square tube. So in step 2, we'll be installing 2 of the F2 frame pieces. We lay them out on the workbench first to ensure that the flanges are facing up. Once there, we can flip that back piece up and then use the workbench to our advantage. We will tap on the end of that tube and seat it against the corner connector. You'll notice I'm helping him out. If you do have someone else helping you with this, it can make the process much easier. You can set the subassembly aside once you're done to clear the workbench for the next step. In step 3, we'll be installing the C2 corner connector into the frame piece marked F3. There's actually 2 pieces marked F3, but you can use either one. You see the port on the bottom of that connector. That's actually the back right bottom corner of the enclosure. That's what we're installing. And so you want that port to be at the bottom of that F3 piece. That's what allows the power supply unit cable to pass through the enclosure. See, the inner corner of this other connector is aligned with the missing flange of the other connector. We'll hammer this together. And I guess for the last time I'll say, if you need more assistance in the orientation of these parts, refer to the manual. Now we're going to join these 2 pieces together. So you'll notice under Luke's right hand, that is the back right corner of the enclosure. So this is your point of view. If you were using the 3D printer, that will be the back right corner. So he's getting these pushed in my hand and then using the rubber mallet to get everything seated correctly. Now he's going to install 3 of the pieces marked F4 to the front right, back right, and back left of the frame. I want to ensure that all of the flanges are facing inwards. The panels will slide into the grooves, so just make sure the flanges aren't facing towards the exterior of the frame. Now the frame F5 is the same type and shape of frame, but it has holes in it, as you can see there. This is what the hinges bolt into, so we want to make sure the holes are facing forward. Then we're going to use one of our titanium Talon utility knives to peel the protective film off of the panels. This is the panel right. We're going to get the film off and then slide it into the grooves on the right side of the frame. We're going to ensure that the window is towards the bottom back right of the enclosure from our perspective. You see how it slides into the channels there. We'll do the same with the PB or panel back. You'll notice it has a hole there. That's for the thermostat, for the optional AC Infinity thermostat probe. And now for the panel left. You can see me in the reflection. Nothing important with the panel left. Just make sure that it is horizontal, not vertical. Then we clean off the bench and pull out our frame piece marked F7. We're going to install one of the C3 corner connectors into one of the sides. Beauty of the C3 corner connectors is that there are no particular orientations to them. They're symmetric all the way around. So we'll beat those in there, and then we will install the 2 pieces marked F6. Once that's put together, we're going to flip this over so that it's oriented correctly for our panel insertion. We'll get the top panel, or PT, out of its protective film. And we want to ensure that this is installed correctly, so it'll slide into the channels with all the windows and cutouts towards the back right side of the lid. You'll notice he's having some trouble getting it fitting into that back flange, so he lifts it up and slides it all the way in. Now we're going to install on step 13 the frame section using the remaining C3 corner connectors and the piece marked F3. Standard procedure there. And once he's done with these, we're going to join this piece together with the lid and then the lid to the rest of the frame. So here's the lid. I'm going to stand that up on its end, and you can see the orientation there. It's important to make sure that the panel is inside the flanges while you're hammering on these. You don't want it to get pinched in there. So the lid's done. Now we're going to bring the base back up and join the lid and the base together. Again, it's important to make sure that all the panels are in place before you go hammering on it to ensure that you're not going to pinch anything or crack it. You notice also that he started everything by hand first before hammering on that. That is pretty important to ensure squareness and proper insertion of the corner connectors. Now we're going to install the panel door. Peeling off the protective film, we tried to get some cinematic shots of this, but none of them came off as cleanly as we had hoped. That was probably the best one. So here you see our door hardware. We're going to start by installing the magnet into the knob. There's two magnets, and we want to ensure the correct polarity so that obviously the door is attracted and wants to close shut. So we have a little procedure for this. We'll take out both of the magnets. You can see they're stuck together in the bag. And we're going to set the magnets on the bench and then push the knob on top of them to seat it into the knob insert. Once it's seated into the knob insert, we will press it into the latch. So this gets both of the magnets seated, ensures the polarity is correct, and then when we pull them apart, you can see that they are installed in both pieces. Now we're going to take the insert back out of the knob and go ahead and thread this into the panel door. The logo is on the top left corner from our perspective, and so the knob will be on the outside on the same side as the logo. With that done, we can start working on the hinges. We found that it is easier to get the hinge males installed onto the frame first before trying to install the females onto the panel, because you can hang the female hinges on the male hinges and then use one hand to hold the panel, the other hand to hold the screwdriver. So this is why we make assembly videos. Hopefully you can pick up on some of these techniques. Now these hinges do have some adjustability in them, and we don't do a great job of showing how to adjust the panel door correctly. Basically, you want the door to sit squarely inside the frame, and you want it to swing without hitting any of the extrusions. And you also want to adjust the latch, which you'll see in a second, so that the door intersects with the latch correctly. But you do have a lot of adjustability here, so play around with that until you get the door sitting just right. So now I'll install the hinge female. We set those on the hinge males in the open position. We'll get our washers installed on the screws. It's easier to have all this kind of set up beforehand. Then use one hand to hold onto the panel, the other hand to install the hardware. Again, if you have a helping hand nearby, it can make this process much easier. Now we're going to snap the latch into the frame and adjust the height so that it matches up with the knob. Again, we just want the door to swing freely and cleanly. So we took the door off so that we can have access to the inside of the enclosure. We're going to start off by prepping some screws with some washers, and then we will hold the PSU vent on the left side of that right side panel and get a few screws started by hand. If you're not aware, this PSU vent works by allowing the PSU inside that's attached to the printer to expel and radiate heat outside of the enclosure. So it's not a hermetic seal, but it does allow that heat to dissipate without really disrupting the environment inside of the enclosure. You'll notice that left wall of the PSU vent got a little warped. So Luke is going to undo that bottom screw just a little bit to loosen up that corner, straighten out the wall, and then tighten it while he's holding it in place. Now we'll work on the filter assembly. We'll take the filter basket, and we colored the little arrow black, and yours it just protrudes a little bit. That's going to be the starting point for the activated carbon sheet. We're going to tuck one into that open slot, wrap it around the rest of the basket, and tuck the other end into the same slot. If you're having a hard time doing this, you can take the filter media out and stretch it out with your hands and have a little bit more to work with. You can also use a tool like a screwdriver, like you see us doing, to help tuck the ends into that gap. Now we'll install the diverter flap into the diverter housing. It is important to do it in this way, so we'll face it up 90 degrees, snap it in place, and then fold it down. This provides the right friction fit that we're looking for. If you do it another way, that friction can be lost and the flap will just fall. Now we'll take the filter adapter, put it on the bottom and the diverter housing and flap, and put it on top, and begin bolting that in. Now we're going to install the filter. So that arrow is going to be facing towards the back. This is to align with the hole for the thermostat probe to fit through. So you slide those 2 notches up and then twist it to lock it in place. And again, there's that hole. You want the arrow to line up with it. Now we're going to unbox our AC Infinity Multifan S2. So it's been a great integration. We're really happy that we found these. Get everything unpacked there, and then the fan comes with these little rubber pieces of hardware. We're just going to yank those out from the bottom or the big side. And then we're going to set the fan on top of the enclosure behind the diverter housing. Now we've since updated our procedure. We do use washers now with these screws. Basically, the rule is anytime we have a conical screw head meeting a flat surface, we use the washers. And if you want to learn more information about how this filter works, you can look at the FAQ section on our website. We do plan on making videos with all these different features in the future. Now we have the tedious task of running all of the panel gasket. So what Luke is doing is just running it to length, marking it with his thumb, and then cutting it with the utility blade to length. It's kind of a messy way to do it, but honestly, it's probably not that big of a deal. But you can either cut all of these to length beforehand, which we've outlined in the manual, and then go and put them all in, but it's a lot faster to just run it to length along the bar, mark it with your thumb, and chop it. Now, notice he's using both of his hands on either side of the tube and pushing both pieces of gasket at the same time. That allows the panel to stay in the center of the tube and keeps you from accidentally pushing the trim into the channeling. That can be kind of annoying. So him and I worked on this for about 15 minutes and got all these pieces in. So you can see them. There's basically, 4 pieces of extrusion gasket on either side of the panel, and so it takes a little while to do this, and it can be a little frustrating. It's something that we tried to work around and design around, but it just looks so nice, and it also does do a really good job of sealing up any of the gaps, and it really does a good job of securing the panels and the frame. So now we'll work on the spool holder. Just pressing some bearings into those sleeves. If you have a tough one, you can flip it over and push it onto a table or hammer it down, but get those bearings pressed into the wheels. Then we'll set those on top of the posts of the spool holder bases. And then we'll install the bearing keepers. So this keeps the bearings from sliding off of those posts. There is a specific orientation to those keepers. One side is conical for the screw head and one side is stepped so that it fits on the post correctly. These should not prohibit the rotation of the wheel at all, so it actually shouldn't touch. If it does, maybe just loosen it up, rotate the keeper a little bit, and then tighten it back in place. But I think we did give it enough clearance. Haven't had that issue, but it was something I was worried about. So we get those thrown in there, and then we can free spin the bearings. Always have to check those, right? So now we can install them onto the railing by just snapping it over. We want the wheels to face towards each other on these spool holders. And they are pretty much infinitely adjustable up the length of this rail. We also provide a larger spool holder base that spaces the wheels apart further, so you can put those really big, like Coax LLC spools on. So we flipped roles here. Luke is now holding the camera, and I'm going to install the LED lighting. This is an optional thing. We don't resell any of the electronics because it makes it much more expensive for you and just more difficult for us. So I'm going to take the filter out of the way, and I'm going to start the LED light strip in the back right corner so that the power cable can be routed down towards the bottom right of the enclosure with the port through it. And so we're just unmasking little sections of the light at a time and pressing that on firmly. You can see how I did my corner bends there. There's a couple different ways to do that, but I found that to be probably the easiest and cleanest. So we're just going all the way around the underside of the top of the enclosure. When we get to the bottom, these strips are marked with a spot that you can cut it. So we're both got our hands crammed inside this thing trying to fit the camera and the wrench and everything else for the pliers. So anyways, find that mark, chop it, and then lay the rest of that down. It's okay if it doesn't match up to the corner perfectly. It's a ton of light. And here you can see with the lights on, this looks really nice. It's very clean. There's obviously a ton of LED options available out there. You can get color changing ones or remote ones. Just make sure they're adhesive backed so that they can attach to that rail. And also, probably a good idea to wipe off that rail. Now on to the thermostat. So we have our Thermostat Mount. That's one of our optional 3D printed files. And we have the AC Infinity Thermostat Controller 2. It's a pretty nice thermostat, and I think it's only about 35 bucks, so it's a really good value for the price. So we're going to take that out. We'll set it aside. There's the power cable. That's the thermostat probe, and then we have this hardware bag. We're going to take all the contents out of this and find the shorter screws. That's what we can use to attach the controller to the mount. Once we've gotten all these screws tightened, the same way that the spool holder bases snap onto the rails, the same way that this mount snaps onto the rail. So you want to set the distance on the rail from the front of the enclosure to whatever you want. You see we kind of blow through that here in a second, but basically get it to a comfortable spot. We found all the way forward up to about halfway back on that rail is a pretty comfortable position for it. So here it is being installed, snaps right on. We put it about halfway back. Then we're going to install the power cable, the USB for the fan, and the thermostat probe. Then we'll take that thermostat probe and feed it through the hole in the back panel. And that's going to go in between the two ends of the carbon filter that are tucked into that slot. So Luke's going around to the front side of the enclosure, and he's going to feed it through. This is kind of optional. You can leave the probe right there sticking through the window, or you can push it all the way into the filter. Kind of depends on what you want. So here it is from the left side looking in. Now we're going to take this zip tie, and this is kind of optional, but we thought it looked neater. We're going to use that zip tie to tuck this extra USB port on the fan in line with the wires. This is more just like a cable management thing. Then we're going to take our cable keepers, get them positioned on the rail, and then start tucking wires into them. Maybe you can see now why we are so picky about where the thermostat sits, because once you run all these cables, it's kind of a pain to move it. So we had it up front at some point, but it just kept getting in the way of things because we like to use that space to like set down tools or prints, whatever. So keeping it away from the front of the enclosure is a little bit better in our opinion. But we're just plugging away here, getting these cables into their keepers, and after that step, your enclosure is now finished. So congratulations on the build. I'm sorry we didn't include any gummy bears, but maybe in the future. We're going to go ahead and get a print started. So we brought the printer over and preheated it. Now we're going to unload the filament. And I want to give a round of applause to Luke because he's just going off of verbal commands. He's never actually done this on the Prusa. And so I was like, hey, you want to help me film a video? And he's like, sure. So he's literally doing all this for the first time. But that should be a testament to how easy this is to do. So after we get it assembled and the filament off the printer, we're just going to set the enclosure over the printer. And if you have something above your printer where that's not possible to set it over, you can also put the printer through the front door. So you just recommend taking the door off and then setting the enclosure in there. So he's going to go through the backside and just make sure the cables are routed through that C2 corner connector, and then back over to the front, and he's going to align the 3D printer to the PSU vent. We want to make sure that the PSU is matched up to that vent really well, just to ensure that there isn't any big gaps. You can kind of see the power button down there at the bottom of the PSU vent, so you can't access that from the outside of the enclosure. So now we're going to plug in the AC Infinity system and the lights. Luke likes taking the door on and off, so we just let him take it off for this one. But we're going to install the spool. He's adjusting the spool holders right now, keeping them centered with that slot that the filament's being fed through. He's going to insert it into the extruder and get it primed. And we're going to start a 3D print. It's going to be one of our 3D printable Talon utility knives. And that's going to be the maiden voyage on our enclosure. There he is, putting that door back on. On and off, on and off. And our print has now begun. Well, alright, your enclosure is now officially built. And just have a few closing remarks while I've got you here, if you've stuck it out to the end of the video. We really do appreciate the support of all of our customers, and we really enjoy making enclosures. It seems kind of silly maybe to some, but This was a problem for us. We couldn't find an enclosure that really ticked off all the boxes that we wanted, so we decided to make our own and sell it. And so far it's been doing really well. So we're very thankful to our customer base, and especially those that had to wait so long while we hashed out different designs and things like that. The reason we took so long is because we wanted to deliver an outstanding product, and I think that we have done just that. From the 3D printed parts not needing any kind of support, having no waste, to the assembly process being about as simple as possible with the minimal amount of hardware and effort needed, I think that we have ticked off all the boxes that we possibly can while keeping the price modest. We've really enjoyed designing this and fabricating it and recording this video, and we hope that you enjoy using your SingleCell MK2. Thanks for watching. Bye.